Thank you and good evening. It's great to be here. The task I was asked for is to spend 10 minutes addressing the question, blockchain, game changer or passing fad? So of course, being the CEO of ADCA, the industry association that promotes the adoption of blockchain in Australia, I would argue it's a game changer. What's my evidence? Well, really simple. Blockchain is now a theme in Dilbert. So if you're part of Dilbert, then quite clearly you have made it to the real world of business today. The interesting thing about this cartoon, though, is it's actually almost 6 years old. So Dilbert, as is often the case, is well ahead of the curve in terms of adoption and understanding business trends. Some of the people in our business community might be a little bit more like the pointy-head manager there, though. So I guess why do I think it's a game changer is probably the key question. Before I get into that, just very quickly, who is ADCA? As David said, we are the Australian Digital Commerce Association, which is the industry body that represents Australian companies that are investing in, or at least investigating, the use of blockchain technology. And it's our belief that blockchain technology will be a transformative technology that will shape basically pretty much everything about the way our society and economy works over the next 20 or 30 years, and that there will be a small number of countries that will be at the lead of that change, and everybody else will get left behind. And it will be a significant piece of economic infrastructure that is the equivalent of building railways in the 18th century or electricity networks in the early 19th century, or dare I say it, broadband networks in the late 20th century. Not something that Australia's got a particularly proud record on. And excitingly too, ADCA is merging with Blockchain Australia, which is the group that David is the CEO of. And that's a really nice marriage. ADCA's been focused at the B2B end and Blockchain Australia more at the community footprint end, so it's a great connection that's going to happen. So, what I'm going to try to attempt at the moment is a fairly simple explanation of why I think blockchain technology is a game changer. And I'm going to try to give you a sort of an understanding of the business implications of the technology and the way it works, not a technical description. Ma'am, what's your name? So Catherine, I have $50, right? I might take that back from you at the moment, but the way money used to work was it's a bearer thing. If I give you a $50 note, possession has passed from me to Catherine. She now has legal title to that $50 note, right? Or at least she did. Thanks, Catherine. All right? So that's the way money used to work. But of course, money is now a very, very small part, like cash money is now a very, very small part of the way we exchange value. So mostly now we do it electronically. So I might say to Catherine, I'm going to give you $50 and here's my electronic proof. Now there's one big problem with that. What's your name, ma'am? Kanisha. Like any digital asset, it's possible to make a perfect replica. So I can give Catherine $50 and give Kanisha $50, and they've both got $50. They both believe that they've taken $50 from me, which is great for me if I can persist with that idea, but not really good for the running of an efficient economy because we're going to have a squabble at some point, right? So that's like copying a video or a music file. You can make this perfect copy and you can send that record. Now, how do we solve that today? Well, the banking system keeps the ledger for us that says, okay, the $50 I've given to Kanisha is the first transaction, and therefore when I give this $50 to Catherine, I'm now committing fraud because I'm actually trying to attempt to pass off a value that I don't possess anymore. So that ledger is maintained for us by the banking system, right? Which is great. It works pretty well, and banks invest a lot of money in making sure that that system is secure. But it is open to problems. How many people here have reconciled your online bank account against your actual transactions in the last month? In this group, I would hope that the group is slightly higher than the average, but it's probably only 20% maybe, I don't know. All right? So we trust that system. So there's this guy called Satoshi Nakamoto back in 2009. And he came up with a different idea. He, she, they, we don't actually know who Satoshi was, right? And it's all about this idea of the double spend problem. So this double spend problem, how do you know that if I'm passing a digital asset that it's the authentic one? So I'm going to use some old-fashioned technology. Because we're merging, I'm not going to need these business cards anymore, so I'm going to just hand them all out. But if you could keep them, because I want you to just pass them all around if you wouldn't mind. Grab a pen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this $50 to one or another of these two ladies, either Catherine or Kanesha. Right? I want you to watch me, and I want you to write on the card who I gave the money to. Right? Just something simple, right? Just so that you know for yourself. So I'm passing the money this way. Right? So just write on the card who I gave the money to. Everyone who thinks I gave the money to Catherine, please hold your card up. Everyone who thinks I gave the money to Kanesha, please hold your card up. Thank you. So right there, you have what's called a consensus protocol, the wisdom of crowds, right? By me letting all of you observe the fact that I have conducted this transaction and letting all of you write down your own copy of a record that says that I have conducted this transaction, I have now made it very, very difficult for myself to fraudulently pass the money the other way, because you are all witnesses and can compare with each other to the fact that I've done this transaction and not that transaction. And that is basically the fundamental idea behind blockchain and distributed ledger technology. There's a lot of complicated maths and sophisticated programming about how it works, but it's this idea that it's actually better to entrust the security, if you like, of information to a crowd than to a central point which is subject to failure. Right? That's the fundamental concept behind the way blockchain technology might change our economy. So, just very quickly, Bitcoin and blockchain. Bitcoin was the initial idea, the vision of Satoshi Nakamoto, and it was to use this blockchain technology to create, in effect, a digital currency, and one, interestingly, that doesn't involve the banks. Some people might suggest that's why the banks were a little bit schizophrenic about blockchain and Bitcoin technology, because they might not be necessary. Blockchain itself is the underlying technology that makes all of this happen, right? And it works on this idea that I was just talking about. The main takeaway about that is not only can value be transmitted, but any transaction can be recorded. So, if you take nothing else away from my presentation tonight, it's this idea that blockchain and the distributed ledger technology around it enables this idea of a single source of truth. I see what you see, and you see what I see, and follow along with me this bit, because this is the important part. I know that you see what I see, and you know that I see what you see. Right? And that second layer is what's really, really important. If it is possible to believe that we are all looking at the same accurate, complete, and up-to-date piece of information, then we can redesign any business process in a way that removes the need for reconciliation, audit, and verification. And they are expensive things in the way we do business. Right? So we don't have time to talk about the technology tonight, but if you can take that assumption and work with it, if it is possible to believe that, we can redesign the way we do business quite fundamentally, because we don't need to check with one another anymore. Right? Very quickly, I'm going to introduce the idea of a smart contract. So as well as recording a transaction on a blockchain, the other thing you might choose to do is actually put a computer program on a blockchain, so that you know that the computer program is also something that hasn't been changed or modified by anybody else, because everybody can see that it's the same program. Why would you do that? Robots, right? More and more in the world we're coming to, we want to authorize these robot agents to act on our behalf, which is great. If it does what we want, it's a great streamlined way to save ourselves time, but there's one big problem. How do you know that the robot is actually going to do what you want it to do if you didn't write the robot? Right? Where did the robot come from? Who might have modified it? These are big questions. So if you put the robot on a blockchain, then it's possible to say, okay, I've checked it out, and if event A occurs, output B will follow. Once I've done that, I can be sure that no one has meddled with it afterwards, and therefore I can trust the robot to conduct those tasks on my behalf. Right? Let's look at an example. Simple example. I'm going to skip past these, I don't have a lot of time. Simple example, online escrow. You're up late at night, you decide you want to buy some steak knives or whatever it is from the online vendor. It might look a little bit like this at the moment. You have Bill and Sally. Bill sends his money to Sally. Sally's got Bill's money, right? Yes, with a credit card, there's clawbacks and all sorts of stuff, but in effect, Sally's got Bill's money. Because she's got Bill's money, she's confident in sending him the stuff, but Bill is actually just hoping that she's going to deliver her side of the transaction, right? That's the way it looks. Using a so-called smart coin, we might be able to change that. So Bill and Sally once again, Bill sends Sally a smart coin. So it's value, but the value is locked, and what's locking it is a computer program that says, until a following event occurs, do not release this value to Sally. But Sally's got the coin, so she knows that provided she does what the condition precedent is, she will be paid. So she's confident in releasing the goods, and in this case, let's say the condition precedent is, I want to see a barcode scan confirming that the product has been delivered to Bill, right? That automatically sends back the key that unlocks the coin, and now Sally has a value. So in this transaction, we have now evened out the bargaining power between two independent parties. They don't need to trust one another because the maths in the system provides the trust for them. It's an ugly expression, but it's the so-called trustless transaction or the trustless economy. Right? Okay, I don't have a lot of time. Very, very quickly, to give you some sense of the scope of where blockchain technology might impact our economy, I'm going to introduce you very quickly to a couple of companies, Australian companies, that actually have solutions in market that are already starting to impact the way we do business. Uprove is a WA company. What they do is they allow you to put an image on a blockchain, and right down to the individual pixel, if a single pixel of that image is subsequently changed, you can later prove that the image has been manipulated and it is not the original. Interesting implications for insurance claims, for example. Power Ledger, another WA company, they're using blockchain to enable peer-to-peer trading of energy between your solar rooftop, your battery, and your smart machine. Long discussion about the way the energy markets used to work, but in a distributed energy market, you need a tool to allow value to be exchanged at the micro level between many, many participants. That's what these guys are doing. AgriDigital are using blockchain in agricultural supply chains. They started last harvest season in New South Wales, where the value of wheat when it was delivered and the quality of the wheat would be recorded on a blockchain and used to make a forward market where that could be traded with some of the big trading houses in Japan, for example, without the delivery of the physical wheat, which was a big change. Water rights management, Civic Ledger. The Murray-Darling system is a national disaster and a national disgrace. At the moment, trying to trade water rights on that system can take up to 9 months. All right? I don't know about you, but what little water there is probably moved a fair way in 9 months. So a system that allows us to trade those water rights in near real time is quite interesting innovation. That's what Civic Ledger are working on. So, last slide. What are the implications for you? Well, here's my guess. Starting sort of a bit of a hierarchy, accounting issues, sort of business operation issues, and the broader industry issues. For accounting, very specifically, accounting standards. We don't have them for crypto assets. We desperately need them. How to value a crypto asset? No one really knows, but we need to solve that problem. Some of you might need to provide investment advice, but things that aren't yet recognised as a financial product create some interesting regulatory issues. And there are tax implications, how to tax these things. In the way businesses operate, any back office process is likely to be totally transformed over the next 10 or 15 years using blockchain technology. The way we do invoicing, the way we do credit assessment and management, the way we actually calculate and remit tax. I had the privilege of meeting Senator Arthur Sinodinos a few years ago. He was not interested in anything I had to say until I told him that when the ASX deploys its blockchain-based share settlement platform, it should be possible for the Australian Treasury to calculate and remit capital gains tax in real time. That caught his attention. The way audit processes work will change, as will KYC and identity. Identity is a massive problem, it's a massive opportunity, and we do not have anywhere near enough time to scratch the surface on that one, but it will change the way we run our economy. More broadly, supply chain applications where we will see blockchain start to make an impact, government services and registries, the way we deliver healthcare. This Australian healthcare system is complicated. It's not quite as bad as the mess in the US. It's a little bit simpler than the way, or a little bit more complex than the way Europeans do it. Being able to understand who's providing what service to whom is one of the key issues. 40% of the cost of the way we run healthcare in this economy in Australia, this is a proper academic research study from RMIT, 40% of the cost of healthcare is absorbed in the reconciliation activities between healthcare providers and consumers, not in delivering healthcare to people. Superannuation, big opportunities to streamline the way we do that. And then at the manufacturing end, we'll see some really interesting implications for the provenance of sophisticated manufacturing items. So that's been a really quick gallop through blockchain technology and its potential implications, but hopefully it's been enough to give you a little bit of an interest and spur some more thoughts. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Massive round of applause. Thank you very much. We'll get Nick back on the panel after we have our next two celebrity guests. Our next guest is Peter Godbolt. He's the founder, he's the CEO, and he's the CTO. I think he's also probably the CFO of a business called Hut33. Welcome, Peter, to the stage. Thank you.
A fantastic intro previous. Okay, in a moment, things are about to appear. There we go. I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes now about that was a very good sort of whistle-stop tour from Nick in terms of introductions, and he's left me his $50, so.
Oh, shit.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you a bit about what we're doing. I'm not only all of those C levels, but basically at the coalface, working on a startup in Australia, in Sydney, building real product, real technology, and looking to deliver real value to Australian businesses. And I'm going to be talking to you about some blockchain basics, some DeFi. Anyone know what DeFi means? No? You'll learn in a moment. Data marketplaces and disruption. So myself and Tim, who's in the room also, we're building a business doing real things for real people, using the technology and the opportunities that Nick described previously. Okay, so we're going to do whistle stop for the first few. The first thing with a blockchain is, I'm just going to mention a little bit about what it is. Broadly speaking, are they even useful? If you look at a flow chart for examining whether they're useful, do I need a blockchain? No. Seriously, there's an awful lot of buzz, an awful lot of hype, and there's an awful lot of problems with exactly the best case for blockchains and what they're for. What it is a chain of blocks. It's a set of data that you can see on the screen there. That's the way in which what Nick described becomes possible, that each block contains a link to the previous block and contains transactions and some other data, and it's the wisdom of the crowds that Nick described in the sense that lots and lots of computers are mining these and doing these, and it creates a distributed and decentralized immutable ledger. And then that word at the bottom is actually very important, which is trustless. Because if you require trust, then you have an element of risk that the trust is misplaced, and that risk must be priced. There's a cost to that. The bank will charge you for administering your accounts and your customers' accounts. And really, the things that the sort of the meat on the bone that blockchain provides is the ability to create trustless applications. You heard some of this from Nick, but broadly speaking, Bitcoin is a blockchain which provides a store of value. It's born in 2009. It does that thing where you have a balance and you can send your balance without requiring trust to anyone else, and they can send the balance to someone else. That's what Bitcoin does. Ethereum was born in 2013 or was conceived in 2013, born in 2014. So it's, 5 years old now, nearly, not quite. And Ethereum is the bit that added compute, the ability to have a program. Smart contracts is a accurate term, but it's flawed because they're not very smart and they're not contracts. It's just compute. It's just the ability to do a sum or do some math or do something on the blockchain. And now there are many, many more. We've got $13 billion coins, $5,700 million coins, $495 million coins, although by my definition, there are only two blockchains, being the two that I described, the Bitcoin and Ethereum chains. Personally speaking, this is an opinion, not a fact. If you are using a private chain, your blockchain is really a base for your data, and there is a wide range of solutions for a good database. You can do that in lots of different ways. Now, some of the use cases might be quite good for blockchain. So there are two blockchains, Bitcoin and Ethereum. The rest are not, in my opinion, decentralized sufficiently. And the only problem with those two blockchains is that neither of them work yet. What that means is that they have some significant issues which relate to scaling and the volume of transactions. They have issues related to the security on the chain that is provided by compute, so proof of work and how much electricity is required. So they're very, very young technology. It's sort of, you've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old in the room here, and they've showed great promise, and they do a lot of things. What they do well, they do very, very well. A little bit about us and what we're doing. Our project is called the HUT34 project. We are building a data toolkit, enabling people to monetize, to create value, to bind data to value. And obviously we've all witnessed the explosion of data analytics, big data, et cetera, and that's an opportunity as far as we're concerned. And we have released a number of products. Our products relate to allowing people in using a Google-powered wallet, allowing the creation of data marketplaces, allowing corporates to exchange data through an open marketplace rather than through a sort of closed source, which may go through IT or go through development things, et cetera. So we've made a number of innovations there. It's a busy space for us. We're pitching this to corporates, and we're working with a number of clients, but we're dealing with particularly the upper right quadrant there. You may recognize some sort of darlings of the ASX, some big companies that are only getting bigger. Data is an enormous opportunity, and we believe that blockchain offers a sort of unique value proposition to unlock value for our clients. These next few slides relate to some of the product that we've shipped, which is real today, which lets you, you can dip your toe if you so wish. That is the creation of a wallet, and we'll talk more about what is a wallet. A wallet is effectively the ability to maintain a balance or a ledger on the chain. Now, one of the issues with a wallet previously was that you might need to go out and buy a piece of hardware, or you might need to go through a fairly complex software solution. You've got to install a whole bunch of stuff. Now, in our early conversations with various corporates that are interested in the data structure and data monetization piece, the creation of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of wallets which require addresses and private keys was a significant hurdle. So we've created an integration with Google that allows both enterprise and the personal user to enter the space. Now, what that means is that a wallet, once I've created one, and in our case, wallets are a busy space. We are one of many providers. So you can go ahead and create an address using our Google-powered wallet. Once you have an address on the Ethereum blockchain, a wallet becomes the gateway to DeFi. And DeFi is what I'm going to talk about for a few slides now. DeFi is decentralized finance. It's finance, it's the type of financial activities that I can perform on a blockchain without reference to a trusted party. So, for example, if I want to take some money, I've got $1,000 in my pocket, or I've got Nick's 50 here somewhere, there it is, and I wish to put it on the blockchain, I can use OnRamp, which is a project I'm involved in, which is a way of, it's a licensed financial product. It's a managed investment scheme under the AFSL licensing regime. So it's a high bar, and that's a suitable bar for retail consumers to think, okay, I want to move some money onto the blockchain. So I send $50 to this scheme. I then receive back 50 tokens. It's a representation coin or a stable coin. Once I've got those tokens, and now we're going to look at a couple of other products that are in the marketplace, it becomes very, very easy to borrow, to lend, to manage, all of which without the involvement of a bank. And any entity or person or business can access this today. So this is a collateralized debt position portal, which allows me to lodge some capital. This is a live connection. I can lodge collateral. I won't do it now, actually. But if I lodge collateral, I can then borrow against that, and it will generate cash for me against the collateral that I've lodged immediately. Again, completely trustless. Future use cases of collateralized debt positions could include other tokenized assets. So not just tokenized money, but for example, data. You may have a data lake that you believe to be of a certain value. You may have that on the books to generate a certain income over a certain period, but you may have capital needs that, for instance, you could collateralize that data lake trustlessly to receive capital up front. You know, these things are multi-collateral CDPs using this decentralized, it's a thing called MakerDAO. They're sort of, the collateral right now has to be blockchain based, but a multi-collateral DAO is imminent, and it's pretty interesting. Secondly, there's peer-to-peer banking, active loans. So you can have Dharma.io as a product which allows you to lodge maybe you've got $200 spare from your paycheck that week or whatever it may be. And you can, or you need some money. This is peer-to-peer banking. I can lodge and I can borrow and I can do it all in a decentralized way. All of these products right now are powered by one of the two blockchains. It has to be Ethereum. So they're using a thing called Web 3.0. That's a set of tools of which we are actively building a subset thereof, but there's a wide variety. So there's a set of tools which power Web 3.0, and they allow you to achieve this sort of functionality. This is what you might need to know. The blockchain is a wave that's been sort of threatening to land for a while. I think I would probably say that there's an element of snake oil within it. There's an element of problems, solutions looking for problems, but there's also a very real and rapid growth where there is utility. A lot of people draw the bow, the connection to the internet, and I'm old enough to have sat in meetings talking about, online sales when we would discuss with retailers, perhaps you should consider opening a shop online, and there'd be sort of little giggles throughout the room because who buys their stuff online, right? And eventually the wave moves to a point where it becomes inexorable and inevitable. So this shows that there is a rapid growth in DeFi. This is the amount of value in the form of ETH that is locked into decentralized finance applications, such as the collateralized positions I showed you previously and the borrowing and the loaning through Dharma. Blockchain is very bad, very, very bad at lots of things. It's expensive per transaction. It doesn't scale very well right now. Lots of aspects of it don't work, but it is very, very good at a few things, which means the ability to interact trustlessly through what is essentially the maths of cryptography. It is very, very good at allowing trustless transactions on a level playing field. And what I believe this graph shows you is that the early adopters are finding ways that technology is maturing to a point where more and more than just a simple value transfer becomes possible. And that unlocks all sorts of opportunities for all manner of businesses, and really in the manner that sort of Nick described. So the new possibilities creates new opportunities and new challenges. And there's a link on that slide also to a roundup of the decentralized finance world. I think I'll say more about this sort of thing in the panel, but we're pressed for time right now, so I will hand over back to David.
Excellent. Big round of applause for Peter. Thanks, mate. We'll get you back on the panel as well. Lots of questions. I've got a good curly one for you as well. Now, I'd like to introduce Alek Svetski to the stage. Alex Zan? No. Bob.
You just call me Bob. We'll get
Alek to the stage to talk to you for 10 minutes about blockchain. And Alek is the founder and CEO of an amazing business called Amber, who may talk a little bit about it now, but we'll get a full detail on the panel. So over to you. Thanks, Alek.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Hello, guys. I'm going to apologize in advance. This is still your stuff, Nick? Yeah, okay. All right. All right. Everyone wants it. All right, I'm going to quickly log in here. So I've been busy running around raising some capital for our business, so I haven't had a chance to prepare anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cherry pick some slides from an old presentation I did, and you'll notice Nick or someone in the audience is probably going to throw something at me, but I'm going to try and give a contrary viewpoint to everyone on this thing, just hopefully to dispel some of the hype. So I presented this at a conference, at a blockchain conference, and I was both the most hated and possibly partially most liked person in the thing. And what I did at the beginning of the presentation was I talked about, well, the first thing I did was I broke the legs underneath the concept of blockchain. And what I touched on, so when Nick did that the little example with everyone earlier with, who wrote what, the power of the crowd, there was one little thing that gets left out, or that got left out, which, I'm not saying that Nick left it out on purpose, but it always gets left out because the focus is always on blockchain and it's not on one of the other elements, which is really important. And that other element is cost, or what's called proof of work. And from the sort of standpoint that I come from, I actually come from the standpoint that proof of work element is arguably more important than the data structure that is blockchain. So the whole point of blockchain, when I started this presentation, I said the whole point of it was that it would solve all the world's problems by providing security and immutability in some way, shape, or form. And what I went and argued was that blockchains specifically, depending on how you define them, are not secure or immutable. And that the concept of security and immutability are derivatives of cost. So something digital is only secure or immutable because it costs some form of money or energy to reverse it, so to make it mutable. And what I went through was what I call the new formula. And this is effectively what, when Nick discussed earlier, the Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever or whatever that was, created this formula for what Bitcoin is, which is this mixture of all of these disparate technologies that have traditionally nothing to do with each other. So networks and Byzantine fault tolerance and economic incentive and disincentives. And they just so happen to, this little experiment or this formula just so happened to function better by taking the unspent transaction outputs, which is effectively the data inside Bitcoin, and grouping it into sections, and then creating an economic incentive for somebody to validate a group of those transactions or that data, and then linking it all together. So the word blockchain, as a fun fact for everyone, was actually not even used in the original white paper. I'm pretty sure the word blockchain came about sometime in 2013, 2014, about 5 years after the invention of Bitcoin. And there was a term that was used by Satoshi, which is called time chain, which is more representative of what Bitcoin and all of this new technology represents, which is an ability to prove something happened at a particular point in time and not be able to reverse it because of the cost that's associated with reversing something. So I won't touch on any of this here, but I guess where I want to go with this is that whole formula. I'll go back to the formula. This whole formula gave us something for the first time in history that we've never had before, which is digital scarcity. And Nick sort of touched on this earlier, is the ability to, traditionally, if I gave you something digital, it was just a copy. There was no cost involved in copying it, and you cannot have anything of value be transferred around if you can just copy it. You cut the legs off the concept of value by doing so. So if you can tie a cost to something digital in the real world, which is what proof of work helps us link. So all of these miners that you hear about and all this infrastructure that is associated with Bitcoin, what they're doing is sometimes it's put forth as useless work, but it's not useless work. What it is work done to create cost in order to tie real world energy to digital to a digital object, thereby giving it a cost. So what I sort of argue when I get up and talk about these things is that this formula gave us something that is technically socially secure, natively digital, globally distributed, shut down and censorship resistant and immutable. But what it really gave us was a scarce digital object. For the first time in history, we have something that's digital and that is also provably scarce. And my contention is that there is probably no real application for that formula outside of a digital store of value or a digital form of money. I don't think, I'm one of the people who doesn't believe that we're going to use blockchain for everything. I actually think that's really counterproductive, because if we use that formula properly, we're going to have something that is fundamentally slow, expensive, and what I call limited in direct scope. So if you try and take the expense out of the blockchain by making it more efficient or removing proof of work or doing any of that, you get something that is no longer what it was invented for, which is creating digital scarcity. So you sort of defeat the purpose of creating it in the first place. So what I sort of went over and I said, where did blockchain go wrong? I covered 3 areas. I said, first of all, I called this the scrambled eggs theory. So if you remember the little map that I just gave you earlier, the formula, and there was sort of blockchain in the little corner, I kind of say if you take one ingredient, i.e. the blockchain ingredient, out of that entire formula, you don't get blockchain anymore. And the example I give to people is if you want to bake a cake, you're going to need flour, you're going to need eggs, you're going to need this, you're going to need that, etc. If you go and turn around and say, look, I'm going to make you a better cake, and look, you don't need flour because we all know gluten is bad for you. You don't need chocolate because it's going to make you fat. But I'm going to make you a better cake, but I'm only going to use eggs, one ingredient. You don't get the cake, you get scrambled eggs. So you get something else. So my contention in this space is that there's a lot of people running around saying, oh yeah, look, Bitcoin was the 1.0, but we're doing something better because we've removed this element and this element and this element, and now we're doing blockchain, and we're going to allow you to do whatever the hell else you want on it. I would say that that is a naive viewpoint, because you don't, the same way you don't use a tank to race on a racetrack, you wouldn't use a Ferrari to do something else. And Pete sort of touched on this when he said blockchain is really bad at some things, but it's really good at others. The other thing that I sort of touched on, and this sort of touches on Pete's and Nick's points, is that the whole premise of this invention, that formula that I showed earlier that we came up with, was to disintermediate someone from verifying that a transaction had come through. And that party that was being disintermediated was effectively the institutions or the banks that have seigniorage rights, or that have the right to tell someone that a transaction has gone through. So what Bitcoin allowed us to do for the first time in history was transact value between each other, know that the bearer instrument was sent from me to you, and not have to have a central intermediary tell us that that was the case. A lot of the stuff that's happening in the blockchain space right now is really interesting, because it's all about intermediaries building blockchains that they're going to manage, particularly with distributed ledger technology. It's like IBM saying, look, we're going to build a DLT for you so that you can buy it off us. And they missed the point of disintermediation, which is what this whole thing was supposed to be about, which again all comes back and is related to cost. And then the last thing is, some people go around and say, look, Alex, you're just talking crap now. Blockchain is that whole recipe. And we're going to take that whole recipe and we're going to apply it to everything. And what I tell people when they tell me that is that that's complete overkill. If we go back to the premise of this idea of digital scarcity and that there's a cost associated with that, the entire world would burn down if we needed to trustlessly transact everything we do. I mean, the world works pretty okay at the moment. If everything that we did, every interaction that we made, every little bit and piece that was stored somewhere had to be stored to the level or the degree of security that a blockchain might provide through all the energy that's expended on proof of work, there's not enough energy in the universe to to allow that to function. So that's not going to happen. So the only things that architecture or that recipe that I showed you earlier is going to be applied to is things that require some extremely high degree of security and extremely important disintermediation of a central party, which the only thing that I've seen to date is a digital store of value or digital money that doesn't involve a central bank or a bank managing it. That's the only thing that's really that contentious. And I mean, you're all involved in accounting and finance and all of that. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that money is a fundamental component that allows society to function. In fact, without getting too far into it here, is without a unit that allows human beings to transact value in some way, shape, or form, we cannot cooperate. And I'm not going to get all anthropological on you, but there's a thing called Dunbar's number, which is basically a measure of our ability to cooperate as a species. And the reason we've been able to create complex society, it comes down to our ability to cooperate and agree on things called shared fictions, which then allows us to create trust really quickly. And what money is a tool to allow for that to happen at larger and more abstracted levels. So if money is that important in society, the only application of this really, really, really expensive formula called Bitcoin, not blockchain, is money, not too many other things. So this was my rendition on the chart, which was, if you go and say that we're going to do a partial blockchain and use some elements of that recipe, it's completely useless. It's just another database, so there's nothing really that changes in any of your lives or any of our lives. If you're going to use the full thing, it's a Rube Goldberg machine, meaning it's a really, 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 really stupid and expensive way to do something. So it's useful for a really limited set of applications. So I guess to sum this conversation up, I can feel the tension in the room already. To sum this conversation up, I would say that there's nothing much going on here. I think in your position as financial experts and whatever you guys are doing in your roles, I think the thing to think about is the creation of a new asset has happened, and you guys will probably need to work out how to record it on your internal ledgers, to hold it as an asset, much the same way as people are holding US dollars or Australian dollars or other stock, for example. So in our business, what we do is, Amber is an exchange, basically. So, but we do it in a unique way. So if someone downloads Amber, they link their bank account, and we monitor their transactions throughout the day. So if they go buy a coffee for $3.50, we'll round up the transaction to $4. We'll take the 50 cents, and we'll automatically buy Bitcoin for them. Because I'm adamant that the only thing that matters here is that just accumulating this new asset class. Simple as that. So what we do is we treat Bitcoin as stock the same way as a cafe would treat milk, right? They buy it for a certain price and they sell it for a certain price, and they might make a markup on that. So there's probably going to be a case for international businesses that, or different types of companies or entities that might want to hold some Bitcoin or might want to transact and use it as a form of payment or remittance around the world. So that there's going to be some stuff there, but I don't think there's much else going on. Accounting's not going to change. Reconciliation's not going to change. Smart contracts have existed in computer programming since day dot. The real definition of a smart contract is basically an if-then statement. Now, smart contracts on things like Ethereum, you can attach programmable money in effect to it, but it doesn't really change any mechanism for you guys. Reconciliation is already moving towards, for example, automation via applications like Zero. I don't see Zero doing anything with blockchain because they don't need to. So all of those things are already going to happen, and that's more fintech related, much less blockchain related. So if I was to get up and finalize this with anything, I would say a new asset class has come out of the thin air, for example, with what Satoshi created with Bitcoin. I'm yet to be convinced, and I may be convinced at some point in time, but I'm yet to be convinced that formula, and I'll just put it up on the screen one last time because I think it's useful to remember, that formula, I don't think, and I'm yet to be convinced that it's going to be applied to anything other than a form of money that disintermediates the central party. And I don't think any of you have anything to worry about in your jobs. No one's going broke, no one's getting automated out. There's a whole lot of reconciliation still to do. So thank you for listening.
You heard it here first. Controversial. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, that was great.